Bhagavatam, 3rd Canto, Chapter 4, Text 22. Yatra Narayana Devaha Naraha Cha Bhagavan Shihi Mridu Tivram Tapaha Dirgham Te Pate Lokabhavano Yatra Narayano Devo Rascha Bhagavan Rishi Dutivam Tapo Dirgham Te Pate Lokabhavano Yatra Narayano Devo Rascha Bhagavan Rishi Dutivam Tapo Dirgham Te Pate Lokabhavano Yatra Narayano Devo Rascha Bhagavan Rishi Dutivam Tapo Dirgham Te Pate Lokabhavano
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishi Mriduti Vrangtapo Dirgang Te Pate Lokabhavano
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishi Mriduti Vram Tapodirgam Te Pate Lokabhavano
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishi Mridutivram tapodirgam Te pate lokabhavino Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishi Mridutivram tapodirgam Te pate lokabhavino
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishihi Mridutivram tapadirgam Tapate lokabhavano
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishi Mridutirvam tapodirgam Tepate lokabhavano
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishihi Mridutivram tapodirgam Te pate lokabhavanao.
Yatra Narayano Devo Narascha Bhagavan Rishi Mridutirvam tapodirgam Tepate lokabhavano.
Where? Narayana, the personality of Godhead. Naraha, human being. Cha, also. Bhagavan, the Lord. Vishihi, everyone. Tivram, severe. Tapaha, penance. Dirgham, very long. Te, performing. Lokabhavano, welfare of all living entities. Translation. There in Bhadrakashram, the personality of Godhead, in his incarnation as the sages, Nara and Narayan, has been undergoing great penance since time immemorial for the welfare of all amiable living entities. Report.
Badrikashram in the Himalayas, the abode of the Narayan sages, is a great place of pilgrimage for the Hindus. Even up to the present, hundreds and thousands of pious Hindus go to pay respects to the incarnation of Godhead, Narayan. It appears that even 5,000 years ago this holy place was being visited by such a holy being as Uddhava, and even at that time the place was known to be very, very old. This particular pilgrimage site is very difficult to visit for ordinary men because of its difficult situation in the Himalayas, in a place which is covered by ice almost all year. A few months during the summer season, people can visit this place at great personal inconvenience. There are 4 dhams, or kingdoms of God, which represent the planets of the spiritual sky, which consist of the Brahmajyoti and the Vaikunthas. These are Badrikashram, Rameshwar, Jagannath Puri, and Dwarka. Faithful Hindus still visit all these holy places for perfection of spiritual realization, following in the footsteps of devotees like Uddhava.
these four dhammas, or kingdoms of God, which represent the planets of the spiritual sky. There's unlimited planets in the spiritual sky, and practically unlimited planets in the material sky also. But still, the spiritual sky is greater. Tripad Vibhuti. 3 parts greater than the material world. So if we think the material manifestation is extraordinary, it's great, imagine what the spiritual world is like. The spiritual world is described that there's no need for sun or moon to give off light or electricity. It's already self-illuminated, all the planets. And even the great sages the residents are also self-illuminated. We find in this material world, there are some living entities who are self-illuminated. Some sages, they give off their own effulgence from their planet. So the spiritual world, because everything is a spiritual energy there, so everything is effulgent. The darkness is in nations. The nations of the material world is due to lack of transcendental knowledge, lack of purity. You see, Krishna is Satchit Ananda, and the living entities are parts and parcels of him. Amaivangso jiva loke jiva buddha sanat alakshasthan indriyani prakriti sthani karshati. Living entities are of the same nature as the Lord, but very small, and so they can make their choice whether to reside under the protection or under the superintendence of the spiritual world or the material world. That's their choice. It's as simple as that. If one wants to be a servant of the Lord, then you can stay in the spiritual world eternally. The Lord isn't forcing people out of the spiritual world because there's overpopulation or something like that. There's no overpopulation, and the Lord is happy to have the living entities there. Just like parents like to have their children, grandchildren, all their offspring, like to have them around them, at least for gatherings. So the spiritual world is a real place. People don't believe in it now because this is the age of Kali, the age of darkness, where they don't have any transcendental knowledge. And there are many who are determined to keep it as it is. They're not allowing these things to be taught in the schools, colleges, about the soul. They say if you teach something about the soul, it's not scientific. It's not verifiable with our instruments. Yes, that's true. It's not verifiable by material instruments, because material instruments cannot calibrate spiritual energy. They're not capable of doing that. In order to calibrate spiritual quantities, one has to have the instruments that are spiritual of the same nature. So, if one has spiritual eyes, Premanjana Churita Bhakti Palochanena, he can see the Lord everywhere. Because he has spiritual vision. He sees the Lord is everywhere. When Hiranyakashipu demanded from his son, little 5-year-old son, that you say your God is everywhere. Is he here? I said, yes. Is he in this pillar? Yes. Well, let's see what he does now to protect his son, protect his devotee. And then Lord Nrsimha showed himself. Krishna was there. Krishna's everywhere. He's in between. Not that there's anything that exists that doesn't have Narayan. Nothing exists without Vishnu. He's all-pervading. He's eternal. He's always manifest. Even though in the material world, as Brahma explained, as Narayan explains to Brahma, that before the creation, I exist only. Before the creation of the material world, only Narayan exists. Narayano paro vyaktat. Narayan is never non-manifest, he's always manifest. In the material world, sometimes the cosmic manifestation is manifest and sometimes it's not. During the time when Narayan is inhaling, then the material world is not manifest. Then when he exhales, manifests again. But the spiritual world is always open. There's no closing. The spiritual world. You can always go 24 hours and find everything going on there. Very nice. They're not even very much interested in sleeping. We see those who are advanced spiritual life, they require less sleep. Such as the 6 Goswamis. Nidra hara vihari kali vijito kshachanta dinar. Practically required no sleep. Still they would sleep at most an hour and a half. Sometimes they forgot to sleep at all. When's the last time we forgot to sleep for a day? So that's a better place to be in the spiritual world. Everything's awake. Everyone is personal. And everyone is amiable. That word is used here. In this verse, amiable, Madhu, mild. The devotees of the Lord are mild. That's why the Kumaras were upset. They were really surprised with Jai and Vijay, guards at the at the gates of Vaikuntha because they're supposed to be very mild and very gentle and very amiable. But instead they were, you can't come in. You little boys, you're not dressed properly. They were seeing things from a material point of view. But that's not proper to have the material vision in the spiritual realm. So they were upset with that. You can discuss it. Have some more discussion. If you like, yeah.
Okay. So any comments or questions on those points that Maharaj was sharing? Okay. Okay. Use. So Maharaj was just saying that in the spiritual world they're mild, amiable, and the Kumars were upset because the Jaya and Vijay were a little bit harsh with them, and they didn't think that was appropriate, and neither did the Lord appreciate that, and he was willing to give them some transcendental consequences for being rude to the devotees. So similarly, we also get some transcendental consequences when we're not mild with the devotees. So that's something actually we're practicing to do, and it's not easy, but actually I was reading yesterday that Srila Prabhupada was describing that the material world versus the spiritual world, or this movement is to become completely free from jealousy. And the material world is just completely full of jealousy. And he said that we have to try to understand what is jealousy. And he said that it means that something is your rightful claim and I won't let you have it. That's jealousy. So it's like something is somebody else's property and I don't want them to actually have it. That's jealousy. And the idea is that in the spiritual world or in the Vaikuntha, Prabhupada describes the topic, he calls it the Vaikuntha mentality. And he desired that these temples be embassies for the spiritual world. And that means that they would be permeated with the Vaikuntha mentality, which is characterized by appreciation for others' service to Krishna and pridelessness when it comes to one's own performance of devotional service, meaning that one doesn't think that his devotional service is very excellent and at the same time is always ready to appreciate the activities of the devotees. And additionally, Prabhupada describes that Vaikuntha mentality and this movement, which is meant for propagating that spiritual consciousness of the spiritual world, is that everybody gets a chance to serve Krishna according to their capacity. Nobody is barred from serving Krishna for any reason. And the idea is that there is a capacity, though. There are qualifications. So it's not envious to for there to be certain services for certain devotees who have certain qualities, right? And other devotees will have other services because they have other qualities, like that. That's not envy. Okay. Can you give a mic to Krishna Shravana? Just to repeat that for all the devotees online. So the Krishna Shravana Prabhu was saying that there are examples of the spiritual pride. And spiritual pride means that there's an example that the devotees in Krishna Loka, like the cowherd boys, sometimes they make very nice garlands for Krishna, but Radharani was saying, when I make a garland for Krishna, then he thinks it's the best garland. So that's an example of transcendental pride, which Rupa Goswami describes in Nectar of Devotion. That's in the Krishna Loka planet. So there's no question of being qualified for those types of transcendental emotions without developing discipline and appreciation for the devotees, respect for the devotees, for the Lord, for the spiritual master, like that. So we simultaneously worship the devotees who have incredibly robust devotional service to Krishna, and we apply the principles which are favorable for us where we're at. Those principles are favorable for them, and Krishna is very pleased. But for us, we're to practice according to the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that we are to be more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all false prestige, ready to offer all respects to others and expecting none for ourselves. And in that state, we can constantly chant the holy name. And one can always make a judge of this, that when we're executing our services and we're not interested to chant, or we're not interested to think of Krishna or to think of the philosophy or to remember the spiritual master or try to render more increasingly enthusiastic devotional service, then our chanting has stopped, Like kirtan, everything is meant to be kirtan for the Lord. Everything we do. It's all pervasive. Kirtan is all pervasive. So if we notice any impediment in that kirtan, in that glorification of Krishna, then what we can understand is that we haven't achieved that status of being more humble than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, ready to offer all respects to others, expecting none for ourselves. That's a very high bar. So what we can understand is that it's both ways, that we can tell that we're not in the proper consciousness when our glorification of Krishna is impeded. And then the positive side is, if we are in the proper consciousness, then our glorification of Krishna will be uninterrupted. So we can always watch for that. How, say we're having some dealings, it may be seemingly insignificant, but my glorification of Krishna is checked. I don't really feel like chanting right now, or I don't really feel like serving at all. I don't want to be, you know, I don't, we're not in this servant attitude. So then that is the sign that we may have made some offenses, and there's some transcendental consequences to those offenses, which are that we lose some taste. It can be, if the offense is minor, it can be momentarily, right? But if it's more extreme, then it can be extended. It can be very extended loss of taste. And the devotees are very merciful, but Krishna expects us to approach them. You know, if we made an offense to somebody on a personal level, then we should bow at their feet and ask them to personally forgive us. And if so many minor offenses which we're committing all the time and are practically unknown to us, but that we theoretically understand we are committing, then every day, once a day during the morning program, then we humbly and sincerely beg all the devotees, wherever they may be, all over the universe, to forgive us for our offenses, which we are surely committing at every moment. And those two kind of reformatory processes make sure that we don't lose our taste for chanting, for serving, like that. Those are just some points. I liked what Maharaj said about we make our choice to reside under the protection of the spiritual energy or the material energy. It's as simple as that. So we're always subordinate, just like we're always subordinate to this body as long as we're under material consciousness. This body and mind has certain formula according to the modes of nature. And I'm forced to act in that way because of my previous activities. The only way to become free from that is to voluntarily place myself under Krishna's spiritual energy, which means service, right? Voluntarily serve Krishna with devotion according to his desire. I'm still subordinate. I'm still given shelter somewhere, right? It's just, if I was just like somebody who's in a storm, right? If I was strong enough to, brave the storm alone, right? If I was stronger than the tree, then I would not have to take shelter underneath the tree. But I'm not stronger than the tree, or, I have to place myself subordinate to the tree and receive protection from it. In the name of, if I'm proud, then I can go without, but I'll surely be subordinate to the elements, to the rain, and I'll be beaten down by that. So I rely on my own strength. So if I have a very fiery constitution and I have a lot of energy, then I may be able to get wet and stay warm and survive somehow. But I'm still conditioned to the limitations of my body. But if I go underneath the tree, then I'm subordinate to the tree, and I rely on the tree's strength, right? Not just my own strength. So we're always subordinate. So that was the simple point that Maharaj was mentioning, and it's our choice. And those who choose to reside in the spiritual world then always serve Krishna. Then rather, those who choose to serve Krishna, they stay in the spiritual world. They're always there. And the idea now is that Prabhupada has brought us the spiritual world here now by his pure devotional attitude. And he's giving us entrance into that spiritual world anywhere and everywhere. he's actually taking Vrindavan everywhere, and he's also asking us to take it with us, where we go. So, anybody would like to say something? Brian Prabhu?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your discussion. My question relates to, so if we are acting in the spiritual consideration and we happen to commit an offense, I guess the long and the short of it is when we were, or for myself, if I was not so spiritually inclined or attuned and I had committed offenses at the feet of people who are in no way spiritually interested, is there some merit or benefit at seeking absolution for the wrongs committed at the feet of a rascal?
Well, it's true that the devotees, they follow in the footsteps of Krishna. Krishna is the best friend of everyone, or the well-wisher of everyone. Suridam sarvabhutanam. And there's other verses which mention that the sages who are perfect in knowledge, they become the best friend of everyone too, because they see equally. So they see equally. They also see everybody's happiness and distress by dint of their own experience with happiness and distress. And they can understand what is suffering for others because they've suffered. And there is something as jiva aparad, just offenses to other living entities. And yes, basically, like say one of the most extreme cases of offenses to living entities is the heinous killing or extricating of other entities from their bodies so I can taste their flesh. That's one of the most extreme. And one cannot understand spiritual topics if he does that. It's not possible. So when one is that offensive towards Krishna's children, he takes it very seriously and he says, you cannot have a relationship with me because you're so disrespectful towards your brothers and sisters, like that. So when it comes to offenses that we create, that we have prosecuted to other living entities or to non-spiritual persons, Maharaj wants to comment now? Okay.
You can hear me? You can hear? You can hear now? Okay. Had an experience a few years ago. I was visiting with some old acquaintances, and I was communicating with them somehow. We had gone to school together. And one man, I remember his name. We weren't very close friends. I remembered him vaguely. And he told me that when I was in school with him, one day I sang in an assembly. I used to sing. And he came up afterwards, and he praised my singing and said it was very nice. He said, in return, I gave him so many offenses. I criticized him for every possible way. And he wants to know, what about that? I was surprised because I didn't remember it. But I didn't doubt it. It was certainly possible for me to do that, although I can't understand why. But I apologize because he said, yes, you're on the right, at least you're on the right path now. So I forgive you. So that was nice to be forgiven. Because we've committed so many offenses, like you just pointed out. Offenses to the animals, offenses to our parents, offenses to our friends, to our everyone. Even those we try to love them, we to end up exploiting them or trying to exploit them. Even the earth we try to exploit. So we're just in such a downtrodden consciousness that actually we end up offending everyone. We're just full of offenses. This age of Kali is full of faults. So the only one good thing about this age is that by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one can become free and liberated and go back to Godhead, and not only go back to Godhead, but take many other souls with us. Hare Krishna.